Arrival on Volcareth, sky above Volcara, burned red as the human ship crashed through the clouds. Fire trailed behind it like the tail of a dying comet. The ship twisted in the air, breaking apart piece by piece, and then slammed into the dense forest below. Trees exploded into flames, animals scattered. The planet had seen war, but this was something new. Jackson lay inside the wrecked pod, blood on his face, breathing hard. The alarms had stopped, the noise was gone. Only silence remained, broken by the hiss of steam and the crackling of fire. He pushed the door open with shaking hands and climbed out. His body ached, his ribs felt broken, but he was alive. Above him, giant trees rose like towers. Their leaves were sharp, glowing faintly with blue veins. Strange calls echoed through the jungle. He pulled his weapon from the pod, a pulse rifle half-burnt but still working. He checked the charge. 1 shot left. That was all. He didn't know this world. He didn't plan to be here. The last thing he remembered was a bright flash near the asteroid belt, and then darkness. Far above, on a cliff hidden in vines and shadows, Nicera watched him. She was a Volcaran, tall, armored in bone and crystal, eyes glowing silver. She was one of the elite huntresses of her people, trained to kill, to track, to survive. She had seen many creatures fall to this planet. None lasted long, but this one stood. He didn't panic. He didn't scream. He checked his wounds, wrapped his arm with fabric from his sleeve, and began walking with purpose. That was rare. She narrowed her eyes. What was a human doing here? Their kind was weak, soft, emotional. Yet something about this one was different. Jackson moved quickly, using his knowledge of survival. He collected glowing moss from a tree to seal his wound. He spotted a small creature, lizard-like with wings, and threw a shard of metal at it. It fell, and he roasted it over the fire. He started with sparks from broken wires. The meat tasted bitter, but it gave him strength. Night came fast on Volcara. The sky turned black. The stars looked closer than they should. Strange lights moved through the trees, not fireflies, but something larger, watching, waiting. Jackson didn't sleep. He sat with his back to a stone, rifle in his lap, ears alert. He heard them before he saw them, a group of shadow beasts with red eyes and long, curved claws. They circled him in the dark, breathing heavy, drooling poison from their mouths. He stood slowly, aimed his rifle, and waited. The first beast charged. He shot it clean through the eye. The others rushed forward. He jumped over one, rolled across the dirt, grabbed a broken metal rod from the ground, and stabbed it through another's neck. Blood sprayed. One beast bit his leg, but he slammed his elbow into its skull until it cracked. It was not perfect. It was brutal, but it was survival. Nicera watched it all. No fear, no hesitation. The human moved like a soldier, but fought like a wild animal. She had seen elite Volcaran hunters fall to those same beasts. But this human, he didn't just survive, he fought back. He adapted, she whispered to herself, almost in disbelief. Impossible. Jackson limped back to his fire, panting, face covered in sweat and blood. He looked up at the sky. He didn't know who was watching, but he raised a middle finger and muttered, "Not dying here." Nicera's lips curved into a smile. This human was interesting, perhaps even dangerous. In the hidden city of Valkar, deep within the cliffs, the Valkaran Council met in silence. A watcher drone had captured the entire fight. They played it on a glowing wall for the elders to see. "Another off-worlder," said one, shaking his head. "He will die like the others." "No," Nicera said from the shadows. She stepped into the chamber. Her voice was calm but firm. "He is different." The eldest counselor turned to her. "You speak for a human." "I speak for a hunter," she replied. "And a hunter like that deserves to pass on his genes." The chamber fell silent. No one had ever heard her say such a thing. Back in the jungle, Jackson looked at the stars again. He didn't know it yet, but his presence had changed everything. He wasn't just a man lost on an alien planet. He was the start of something new, something that would shake the galaxy, and he was only getting started. The trials of the Crimson Jungle. The next morning, the jungle woke with a roar. Birds with metal-like wings screamed from the trees. Vines moved as if alive. Fog covered the ground like smoke, making it hard to see. This was not an ordinary jungle. This was the Crimson Jungle, the deadliest place on Volcara. Jackson didn't know the name, but he felt the danger. His instincts told him everything was watching. He had slept only an hour, resting just enough to keep going. His legs still hurt from the bite, but he wrapped it tighter with bark and moss. He had to move. The crash had drawn attention. He couldn't stay in one place too long. He began walking east, toward the rising light, using broken tech as compass shards. Every step was a risk. The ground sometimes gave way to pits full of sharp roots. A red fog drifted between the trees, burning his lungs if he inhaled too deeply. Strange plants hissed when he passed, opening their mouths like hungry animals. He kept his weapon ready, though it was nearly useless now. No charge left. Still, Jackson stayed calm. He moved slowly, scanned every shadow, and listened. He didn't just rely on the tech. He trusted his senses. That was something no machine could replace. High in the trees, Nicera followed quietly. She watched how he stepped, how he noticed the smallest detail, like a bent branch or the pattern of footprints. He was not trained in Volcaron hunting, yet he moved like someone born to survive. She had hunted for years, trained with warriors, fought in trials, but this human, he was raw, untamed. Still, something about him felt ancient, as if he had done this many times before. Hours passed. Jackson found a river. It flowed dark and slow, with steam rising from it. He knelt to drink, then stopped. His eyes narrowed. Movement under the surface. Something big. He backed away just in time. A creature with 6 eyes and long arms shot from the water. Its skin was like stone, and its mouth was filled with spinning teeth. Jackson rolled backward, grabbed a sharp rock, and waited. The creature lunged again. He jumped aside and stabbed the rock deep into one of its eyes. The beast screamed, flailing wildly. Jackson used its moment of confusion to slam another rock against its head. Again and again. Blood poured out, thick and black. Finally, it fell still. He breathed hard, chest rising and falling. Then he looked at his reflection in the water. His face was scratched, his eyes tired, but there was fire in them. He didn't know how long he could keep going. But he knew this. He wasn't going to die lying down. Nicera stood above, hidden in the leaves, stunned. That creature had taken down to Volcaron scouts last moon cycle, yet Jackson had killed it alone. No tech, no backup, just his will and his hands. She felt something strange inside her. Not fear, not pity, something else. Respect. She climbed down, after he moved on, landing silently near the beast. She examined its wounds, the rocks stained with blood, the trail Jackson had left. Every move he made had a reason. She shook her head. The elders would never believe it if they didn't see it themselves. Jackson continued deeper into the jungle. The trees here were taller, their roots thicker than cars. Strange symbols were carved into the trunks, glowing faintly in the shadows. He didn't understand them, but he felt something like a warning or a memory from long ago. Suddenly, he heard a voice, soft, whispering, not in English, not in any language he knew. It came from the air itself. He turned in circles, trying to find the source. Then he saw them glowing shapes in the air, floating like dust. They moved around him, showing flashes of old battles, hunters with glowing eyes, beasts with wings, visions, or maybe memories of the jungle. His hand touched one of the glowing shapes. It vanished. Then a pain shot through his head. He fell to his knees. In that moment, he saw flashes, not from Earth, but from Valkara, creatures he had never seen, voices calling him the One, a great war, a bloodline. Then it all vanished. He gasped and stood slowly. His body shook. He didn't know what just happened, but he felt different, stronger, as if the jungle itself had tested him and accepted him. Nicera, still following from above, saw the glowing shapes too. Her heart skipped a beat. The jungle spirits did not appear to just anyone, only chosen hunters, only those with legacy. What was this human? Before she could think further, a loud screech cut through the trees. Jackson spun around, eyes wide. From the sky, a flock of razor wings dove toward him, birds with metallic feathers sharp enough to cut through bone. He ran, dodging between trees, sliding under roots. One bird sliced his shoulder. Another missed by inches. He grabbed a hanging vine and swung across a gap in the ground. The birds followed. He spotted a narrow tunnel under a rock and dove inside just in time. The birds slammed against the stone, screeching in frustration. Inside the tunnel, Jackson lay still, breathing hard. Blood dripped from his arm, but he was alive. Again. Nicera stood above, heart pounding. This man had survived 3 death traps in a single day. No weapons, no help. She whispered the words she hadn't spoken in years. The jungle knows you now. And far away, deep in the heart of Volcara, Something ancient stirred. Challenge of the Prime Fang. Jackson woke up to the sound of growling. It was low and heavy like thunder in the chest of the earth. His body ached all over, scratches on his arms, bruises on his ribs, his clothes torn and stained with dried blood, but his eyes were sharp. "Why did you help me?" he asked. Nesra looked at the fallen beast, then back at him. "Because you did not run." That answer stayed with him. Long after the sun began to set later, they built a fire together. The scouts rested, wounded but alive. Nicera sat near, Jackson silently carving a mark into the ground. It was a symbol, the symbol of a true hunter. He watched her hands, noticing the care she took with each line. "What does that mean?" he asked. She answered, without looking up, "It means you are no longer prey." Away in the towers of the Vulcaran Council, the news of the Prime Fang's defeat spread like wildfire. Some were in disbelief, others were in fear. Why human? Defeating a beast of legend. Whispers began to grow, not just about survival but about legacy, about bloodlines, and what the future might hold. The Council of Bloodstone. The sky over the city of Vakar was dark and wide like a ceiling made of stone and smoke. It was carved into the side of a mountain so high the air turned thin and cold. Massive towers grew from the cliffs like fangs pointing to the stars. Inside those towers, the Council of Bloodstone waited. They were the oldest and wisest of the Valkyran people, each one a warrior, once now cloaked in armor made of crystal and bone. They did not bow, they did not smile, they only judged. Nasura walked through the Hall of Echoes with Jackson behind her. His steps were heavy, not because of fear but because of pain. His wounds were still healing, but his spirit stood tall. He had walked through fire-faced monsters, saved lives. Now he was walking into a room where words could cut deeper than clothes. The guards at the gate opened the stone doors. Without a word, Jackson stepped into the council chamber. It was silent except for the soft hum of power that came from the crystal walls. He looked around at the circle of figures watching him, eyes glowing in the dim light. No faces showed emotion. No voices welcomed him. He stood in the center alone. Nicera took her place beside the high seat. She did not speak, yet she waited. The council leader, Elder Korvax, spoke first. His voice was deep and slow. "Human, you stand before the Council of Bloodstone not as prey, but as something else. Tell us, why are you here?" Jackson raised his head. His voice was calm but firm. "I crashed on your world without choice. I survived because I had to, not because I wanted a war, not because I wanted your respect, but because I will not die for someone else's mistake." There was silence for a moment. One of the counselors leaned forward. "You've fought the Prime Fang. Why? Because no one else would, and there were people in danger," Jackson answered. The council whispered among themselves, "A human protecting Valkyrans." It was unheard of. Another voice rose from the side, a female elder, her tone sharp. "Or was it because you wanted something from us? Power, fame, a place in our stories?" Jackson shook his head. "I don't care about your stories. I only care about surviving and not watching others die while I can stand." Sarah finally stepped forward, her voice strong like a blade pulled from a sheath. "He speaks truth. I watched him. From the moment he fell to this world, he has faced every trial without help, without rest, without fear. He faced beasts that took down our strongest. He protected our scouts. He did not ask for reward. He did not seek favor, and more than that." She turned toward the council. "He was chosen by the Crimson Jungle. The spirits showed him visions. He touched the memory, dust, and lived it." Long breath filled the chamber. That was not something even most Valkyrans could do. The council leader raised a hand. "And what do you believe this means?" Nicera, "I believe," she said, "that his presence is not an accident. I believe he is part of the old promise, a sign that the time of change is here." Jax looked at her, confused but curious. "What promise?" The chamber shifted. Some of the elders sat straighter, others looked away. Elder Korvax stood. "Long ago, before our wars, before the sky burned, our ancestors hunted across stars. They were powerful, but they saw that strength was not forever, so they made a pact that if the day came when the blood of the hunters faded, a new blood would rise, stronger, wilder, free. And you, human, you carry the signs." Jackson took a step forward. "You think I'm part of that I'm supposed to fix something?" Korvax did not smile. "We do not know, but you are here. And the jungle has accepted you. That is not a small thing." Another elder spoke. "But what if he is a threat? What if he brings war?" "Not Hopi," Jackson answered before Nicera could then stop me. "Right here. I won't run." Sarah looked at him. There was something in his eyes that reminded her of the old hunters. Not just rage or pride, but purpose. Korvax raised both hands. "Enough. We will not kill what we do not understand. Not yet. Let the human stay. Let him train. Let him prove himself. If he is the sign, he will show it. If he is the danger, the jungle will take him." The guards stepped back. The trial was over. Jackson had been judged, but not punished. Not yet. Later, As he stood on a balcony looking down at the glowing jungle below, Nicera joined him. So what now? He asked. Now, she said, you learn what it means to be one of you. Nodded slowly. And if I don't fit, she looked at him with eyes that no longer held doubt, then you make your own place far behind them. In the shadows of the council, a figure whispered into a small device, the outsider has been accepted. Begin phase 2. The wind howled across the cliffs, but neither Jackson nor Nicera heard it. They were already thinking about tomorrow. The genetic secret. Jackson walked through the halls of the Volcaran training chambers, where walls were made of living stone and every surface glowed faintly with the memory of past warriors. His body still ached from the fight with the Prime Fang, and his sleep had been filled with dreams he could not explain, voices and languages. He never learned images of fire and stars and battles that felt too real to be imagination. He told no one. But each morning he woke up feeling like someone else, not entirely human, not entirely alien. Something in between. Nicera had been guiding him every day through the training of Volcaran hunters. She showed him how to move with silence, how to see with more than his eyes, how to listen to the way the forest breathed. They spoke little during training, but she watched him closely, not just as a mentor but as someone who could feel the shift happening deep within Jimin. The Chamber of Memory Crystals, a place few outsiders were allowed. Nicera brought Jackson to meet being known only as the Lorekeeper. The Lorekeeper was old, even by Volcaran standards. His body frail but his mind sharp. His skin shimmered with shifting colors and his eyes never blinked. He stood before a wall of pulsing stones, each one holding a piece of ancient bloodline. Anissa explained that the crystals were more than records. They were part of the living history of Valkara. They responded to blood. They revealed only to those whose genes echoed the legacy of the first hunt. She handed Jackson a small curved blade and nodded silently. He understood without words and pricked his finger, letting a drop of blood fall onto the crystal. The stone pulsed once, then again, and then exploded with light, the chamber filled with swirling images. Entire hunts across alien worlds, weapons forged in fire, hunters wearing armor carved from the bones of gods, all of them human, or nearly human. Jackson staggered backward. The visions came too fast, too strong. He clutched his head as names and faces and ancient words filled his mind. He saw a symbol burning into his thoughts, a spiral made of teeth and flame. The Lorekeeper spoke slowly for the first time in many cycles. This chamber has spoken so loud. Nicera stepped forward, her voice low and steady. What does this mean? The Lorekeeper turned toward her. The human carries the seed of the forgotten line. His blood matches the hunters who vanished before the great divide. He is not just from Earth, he is from before Earth was known. Jackson stared at the crystal wall, his hands shaking. What does that mean? I'm not just human. The Lorekeeper nodded. Slowly, not entirely. The blood of the first hunt is in you, ancient and pure, long dormant. Your arrival here has reawakened the legacy. Jackson's thoughts spiraled. He remembered his parents on Earth, distant, cold, always moving from one research base to another. He never knew where they came from. They never answered his questions. Now he wondered if they even knew. Nicera looked at him with a strange expression, one that mixed awe with fear. You were never meant to be just a survivor. The Lorekeeper warned them both. Others will fear what you are. The council will try to control it, but some in the shadows will try to end it. Back in the city, shadows were already moving. A figure cloaked in dark crystal met with two warriors in secret chambers. The human must be erased before his presence corrupts the blood code. If he is truly of the first hunt, then he is a threat to everything we built. Returned to his chamber that night, unable to sleep. The visions kept returning faster, now louder. His skin itched like something inside him wanted to break out. His muscles felt different, stronger, more aware. Every sound felt sharper, and the world seemed to move slower. Nicera entered without knocking. She sensed the shift too. She watched him as he stood in the dark, his eyes glowing faintly with a light that was not human. You feel it now, she said. He nodded slowly. I'm changing. She stepped closer, not with fear, but with something deeper. You were meant to hear. Looked into her eyes, and for the first time, saw no barrier between them, no wall of species or past or duty, just two warriors caught in something bigger than they understood. Why me? He asked. Because your blood remembers, she said. Later, that night in the deepest vault of the council chamber, Elder Korvac stood alone before an ancient crystal. The same symbol Jackson had seen now glowed faintly on the wall. He placed his hand over it and whispered the code. Activate the Watchers if the blood of the first hunt has returned. Then, the fire of the last war is not far behind. Rebellion in the sky temples, the wind above Valkara's mountains screamed like a wild animal carrying the scent of war across the sharp edges of the sky temples. The floating structures that hovered high above the clouds were once sacred places of learning and memory. Now they burned with smoke and fire, and the cries of betrayal. Jackson stood on the edge of the sky temple of coal, his back pressed to a broken pillar, his heart beating fast, his hands tight around the stolen Valkyron blade, his breath sharp and short, not because of fear but because of what he had just seen. Warriors dressed in black, crystal armor storming the sacred halls, striking down council loyalists and marking walls with the symbol of the broken fang, the sign of rebellion. They had come without warning, rising from the shadows with strange weapons and whispers of an ancient purge. Their goal was clear: erase the human, erase the blood of the first hunt, erase the future before it could be. Sarah stood beside Jackson, her face bloodied, her armor cracked, one of her arms burned by a plasma strike, but her eyes still sharp, still locked onto the stairs where more rebels would appear. She did not ask Jackson if he was ready. She knew the answer already. The two of them moved as one, warriors, born in different worlds, but now bound by the same fire. They ran through the temple halls, once covered in teachings, now scorched by betrayal, fighting off rebels at every turn. Jackson moved with a strength he had not known a week ago. His body faster, his mind clearer, his strikes sharper. Each step felt guided by something older than himself. He blocked a blade from one rebel, spun and slammed his knee into their chest, then grabbed their fallen weapon and threw it into another's leg. Sarah swept through them like a storm, silent but deadly, her blades spinning in wide arcs that left glowing trails of heat. Together they carved a path through the flames. The rebels called themselves the Watchers, claiming to be the protectors of Valkyrian purity. They believed the return of the human legacy was a poison, a danger that would erase their traditions. They had trained in secret, formed alliances with broken houses, and waited for the moment to strike. That moment was now, and their leader was no longer hiding the net. The heart of the Sky Temple stood a spire that reached into the clouds. It was said to house the core flame, the living energy of Valkyrian bloodlines, and beside it stood the one who had ordered the rebellion. Elder Renner, a former council member, cast out for his violent beliefs, now dressed in armor made from the bones of extinct beasts. His voice echoed through the halls as he addressed the warriors. You follow a ghost, he said to the defenders. You trust an outsider to guide your future, but he is not your salvation. He is the end of what we are. Jackson stepped forward, wounds across his arms, breathing hard but voice steady. Maybe that's what you're afraid of, not losing your people but losing your control. Reiner laughed, the sound like metal grinding against stone. You do not understand this world, human. You were never meant to. Then let me show you, Jackson answered and charged. The final battle exploded within the heart of the temple. Fire and crystal clashed, blades and fists thundered in the air. Jackson faced Renner with everything he had, every memory, every lesson, every instinct. He moved with the rhythm of the first hunt, dodging strikes, bending his body like a shadow, unleashing power that came from somewhere beyond his flesh. Nazera fought the elite Watchers, holding the stairs alone, covered in cuts but never slowing, her blades dancing with fury she had never felt before, not just for survival but for belief in something more. In Simone, Jackson and Renner clashed again and again, steel against stone, blood against fire, until finally Jackson found the opening he needed and drove his blade deep into Renner's chest. The rebel gasped, fell back, and crumbled. Silence returned to the temple. The flames still burned, the air still cracked with energy, but the Watchers had lost. Nasera limped to Jackson's side. They stood together in the center of the spire, the core flame pulsing behind them, bathing them in golden light. You fought like one of us, she said. No, you fought like Maury. Jackson looked at the flame, watched it react to his presence, shifting, changing it, knew him, and through it, he could feel everything: the rage, the sorrow, the memory of a species split across stars. We can't go back, he said quietly. Sarah nodded. But we can choose what comes next. From the shadows of the battle, survivors began to emerge, some council guards, some scouts, even some rebels who had seen the truth. They looked at Jackson not as a stranger now but as something else, a sign of change. And far below, in the heart of the jungle, the spirit stirred again, whispering across the roots and rivers that the blood of the first hunt had awakened, not to destroy but to guide. But the battle was not over, not yet. Deep in the mountains, beneath the ruined labs where Jackson's past had been hidden, a signal blinked. A live end. Something ancient, answered, a legacy worth passing on. The fires of the rebellion had cooled the skies above. Valkara now carried silence instead of smoke. The sky temples, once torn by war, had begun to heal, their walls rebuilt by hands that once fought each other. The core flame at the heart of the temple glowed steadier, as if soothed by the blood it had tasted. The memory of battle still echoed in the stones, but so did something new, something that had not lived here in a very long time. Hopi Jackson stood at the edge of a high balcony carved into the mountain cliffs, his eyes scanning the endless jungle below, where rivers glowed and trees whispered secrets. In the wind, his body still bore the scars of war across his back and chest, but his shoulders were stronger now, his stance firmer, his thoughts no longer clouded by confusion. He knew who he was, or at least he knew enough to stop running from it. Jungle had accepted him, the spirits had marked him, the blood in his veins had awakened something older than Earth itself. He was human, yes, but also more. He was of the first hunt, and that meant he was no longer just surviving, he was building something. Joined him, wearing ceremonial armor, no longer bound by duty to the council but by choice to the future. She walked without hesitation and stood beside him, the two of them silent for a long time. Words were not always needed between warriors who had bled for each other. She finally spoke. The council has agreed, the watchers are gone or scattered, and those who remain have accepted the truth, or at least accepted that they cannot silence it anymore. Jackson nodded slowly. I didn't come here to change your world, but I won't pretend it didn't change. Mesh looked at him for a long moment, her expression softer than before. You carry more than our history. Now you carry a new path, something we never expected but maybe always needed. They turned back toward the open sky where a new structure was rising beside the old temples, not a shrine, not a fortress, but something entirely new, a place where humans and Valkyrans would train together, live together, grow together. It was being built from both crystal and steel, bone and wire. It was strange and unfamiliar, but it was real. The young came there to learn not just how to hunt or fight, but how to think, how to question, how to connect. Jackson had met them. Some were human descendants from nearby colonies, others were Valkyrans, curious about the outsider who had defeated the Prime Fang and stood before the Council of Bloodstone. But most of all, they came because they had heard the story, and in that story they saw them. So spent his days walking among them, telling his story but also listening to theirs. He trained with them, taught them how to survive without relying only on weapons, how to think like prey and predator, how to understand that strength was not only in the body but in the heart. Nasira watched him from a distance, at times smiling at the strange way the future had unfolded. Once she had called him an outsider, once she had doubted his presence. Now she knew he was part of something that would outlast them both. There came a day when the jungle spirits returned in the form of glowing lights that danced around the children as they trained. And the elders said they had not seen such a sign since before the divide. It meant that the world itself had accepted this new path. Later that evening, under the red moons, Nicera stood before the gathered temple council and the youth and the warriors, and raised her voice to speak not of war, not of danger, but of legacy. She spoke of the bloodline that had returned not to conquer but to remind them who they once were and who they still could be. She looked to Jackson and said the words that would be remembered for generations, words spoken with pride and certainty and awe. A hunter like that deserves to pass on his genes. There was no argument, no debate, only silence, and then a rising cheer from those who believed, and even from those who had once doubted, because they could see the truth in his eyes, in his actions, in the lives he had. Tusha Jackson did not respond with words. Instead, he stepped forward and took Nicera's hand, not as a symbol of conquest but of unity, of something stronger than blood, something built through fire and pain and choice. Years passed and legends grew. The jungle continued to whisper and the stars continued to move, but the story of the human who came from the sky and walked into the heart of Valkyra became something more than a tale. It became a root in the new tree of their future children, with silver eyes and fire in their hearts, trained in both old ways and new ones, their blood a blend of earth and Valkyra, their minds sharp, their wills unbreakable. They were not just heirs of war, they were the future of peace, and in the quiet places of the jungle where spirits still danced and old beasts still prowled, there remained one truth carved into the stones by hands now gone. He came not to take but to give. He fought not to rule but to protect. He was not chosen by destiny. He chose to become, and in doing so he became legend. The stars above Valkyra no longer whispered warnings. They hummed softly like an ancient song remembered after centuries of silence. The winds that once carried the scent of war now brought the smell of warm soil and wild fruit. The sky temples stood tall, no longer as fortresses but as bridges between what was and what could be. Jackson stood at the center of the garden built on the highest platform of the great temple, his hands deep in the soil, planting something with roots older than memory, seeds from earth, gifted by a passing merchant long ago, now placed gently into Volcaran, soil beside seeds gifted from the jungle itself. Together they would grow, not one replacing the other, but woven together as one beside him. Nicera kneeled silent, focused her hands, moving with care, her armor set aside for the first time in years, her face peaceful. This was not a battle, this was something greater. A beginning. Children ran nearby, chasing light, beasts that danced through the tall grass, their laughter echoing against the ancient stones, their eyes reflected both stars and flame. The blood of two worlds beating as one. Elder Korvax, now older and slower, watched from a distance, a quiet smile on his face as he leaned against a carved pillar. The same man who once called Jackson a threat now called him a brother. The stories were told around the fire each night, not as warnings or legends but as living memory, the tale of the human who fell from the sky and stood against monsters and councils and ancient fears. It was a story, not of one man but of what one heart could do when it refused to break. The jungle spirits no longer whispered. They laughed, sometimes swirling among the leaves to play with the children, or sitting beside the river to sing, their glowing shapes full of warmth. Some still questioned, some still feared, but even doubt had softened its voice, for the results could not be ignored. Volcra was changing, and it was no longer afraid of the change. One night, as twin moons rose above the treetops, Jackson walked with Nicera beneath the quiet sky, their steps unhurried, their words few around them. The world moved with purpose and peace. They reached a cliff that overlooked the valley where the battle had once raged long ago. Below they could see the lights of the new city built by both human hands and Volcaran. Strength, curved towers, and wild vines, soft blue energy pulsing through every wall. It breathed like a living thing. Jackson stood there, eyes steady as the wind touched his face. He no longer felt like a stranger, no longer felt like something lost. Now he was part of something real, something that would outlive even memory. Nicera looked at him, and her voice was soft but firm when she spoke. Your legacy will not be forgotten. Jackson smiled. And it was the kind of smile that only comes after pain and purpose have walked together for a very long time. Then, let it not be mine alone. And in the valley below, the first hunter of the new age was born, not in the fires of war but in the quiet warmth of unity. The story did not end here, for stories never truly end, they simply become roots, and from those roots other branches grow. But for now, in this moment, in this breath, it was enough. The end.